So even if you're already using large language models, LLMs, have you ever felt like you're just drowning in information? Like you wish there was a smarter way to cut through it all. Maybe your summaries are okay, good enough, but you suspect there's something deeper, more precise, just out of reach. Or maybe you find yourself typing pretty similar prompts again and again, just tweaking one little detail and thinking, ugh, there has to be a better way. Well, today, that's exactly what we're diving into, our mission for this deep dive. It's all about giving you the tools, the techniques to get these incredibly concise, yet really information-rich summaries from LLMs, basically making you a more effective learner, a clear communicator. We're talking about pulling out exactly what you need, almost like with surgical precision. Today, we're looking at some really fascinating advanced prompting techniques. We're drawing heavily from Muchkali Murugesen's work, specifically advanced prompting techniques. And we'll zero in on two really powerful ideas, something called chain of density prompting and the sheer usefulness of prompt variables.
Yeah, and what's so interesting here, I think, is that the whole LLM community isn't just building these amazing tools. They're also constantly finding new, often much better ways to actually talk to them. Getting good at prompting isn't really a one-time thing you learn in your set. It's more like an ongoing journey, always refining how you ask. And these techniques we're discussing today, they feel like pretty significant steps forward on that path.
Absolutely. It's like, it's not just learning to drive the car anymore, right? It's like discovering these advanced techniques for navigating any kind of terrain, even the really tricky stuff.
Yeah,
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit more. This idea that prompting isn't just, asking a simple question and crossing your fingers. It's genuinely becoming an art and a science, and it's always changing. But for someone maybe just dipping their toes into these advanced methods, what's a common mistake or maybe misconception about prompting that these techniques really help overcome?
Oh, that's a great point because, yeah, a lot of people start out thinking prompting is just about stuffing keywords into the box or maybe writing one super long, really detailed request up front. The misconception these techniques kind of shatter is the idea that one single perfect prompt is always the goal. Instead, what they show us is that it's often less about that one killer prompt and more about creating a dialogue with the AI. It's almost like you're guiding a conversation or maybe training a junior analyst to really focus in on precisely what you're after. It's about using the LM ability to build context over several interactions.
Right, guiding it. And crucially, it's practical. This isn't just abstract theory we're talking about. These methods have a direct impact on the quality and the efficiency of the insights you actually get back. Just imagine being able to slice right through all the noise, skip the fluff, and get exactly the info you need right when you need it from pretty much any chunk of text. That's the kind of transformative power we're really exploring today. It's not just about getting answers faster. It's about getting much deeper, much more precise answers. And speaking of precision, one of the most exciting techniques for really nailing summarization is called chain of density prompting, COD for short. It's described as this highly effective method for creating summaries that are both concise and packed with information using this process of iterative refinement.
Yeah, its core use is really quite striking. Think about it like this. Asking a single broad question is like asking someone to describe a whole forest in like one sentence. You might get back, it's got a lot of trees, which, okay, it's true, but not very helpful, right? But Kahoot is more like asking them about the biggest oak tree first, then maybe about the stream that runs through it, and then asking for a summary that includes those specific details. You end up with this rich, detailed picture, but you never lost the context of the whole forest. It's like you're building a mental map for the AI step by step, making sure it picks out the right details, the ones you care about, not just, any details. This makes it incredibly useful for tackling large text think reports, academic papers, even whole PDFs. It finds that sweet spot between detail and brevity. And it really gets at that common frustration. How do you pull out detailed, useful insights from mountains of text without just getting totally overwhelmed? Godot offers a really elegant solution.
Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? You mentioned it's a three-step process where you're kind of in the driver's seat guiding the LLM. Can you walk us through those steps? Where does the sort of iterative magic happen?
Absolutely. So it all kicks off with your initial prompt. This is your first broad question. You're just trying to establish the general topic, the main context you're interested in. Really, you're just setting the scene, giving the model its starting point.
Got it. Step one, set the stage.
Exactly. Then comes the iterative refinement. And this is where it gets really clever. So the LLM gives you its first response based on your initial prompt. But you don't just take that and stop. Instead, you follow up with more specific prompts. And here's the key bit. These follow-up prompts actually incorporate details from the model's own previous response.
Ah, so you're feeding its own words back to it, basically.
Precisely. You're using its output to guide its next step. This pushes the model towards a more focused, more accurate, and, well, denser output. You're essentially teaching it in real time what aspects you care most about, preventing it from just wandering off or making stuff up.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And the third step is really continuous feedback. It's not a one and done thing. It's an ongoing conversation, a dialogue. Each new prompt you provide builds directly on the information that was generated in the steps before. So you're gradually honing in, refining bit by bit, getting closer and closer to that ideal information-packed summary you wanted.
That sounds incredibly intuitive when you put it like that. It's almost like having this super efficient research assistant who kind of anticipates your next question because, well, you just gave them a clue from their own last answer. Let's make this really concrete. Can we walk through an example? Say, you've got this dense document, maybe about commercial real estate lease terms, the kind of thing that could take hours to pick apart manually. And your goal is just to summarize the specific details about, say, the rent abatement clause and the relocation clause. Pretty common task for lots of professionals, right?
Definitely a perfect use case.
Okay, so you start with your initial prompt, something general like, what are the key terms in this lease agreement? The model might come back with something like, okay, the lease agreement covers terms like rent abatement, relocation, termination, and subletting clauses. Fine, but that's still too broad. We only care about those first two for this task. So now we move to the first densifying prompt. We focus on rent abatement. You'd ask something specific like, can you give me more details about the rent abatement clause?
Right. You're using the term the model itself provided.
Exactly. And the model, using that context in the document, might respond, sure, the rent abatement clause lets the tenant suspend or reduce rent payments under specific conditions, like when the space is unusable because of repairs or renovations. Much better. Way more specific. We've taken that general term and gotten the core detail. Okay, next, the second densifying prompt, focusing on the other clause. Can you explain the relocation clause in more detail? The model replies, maybe something like, okay, the relocation clause gives the landlord the right to move the tenant to a different, comparable space within the property, but the landlord has to cover all the moving costs. Perfect. Again, we've pulled out the precise details for our second key term, all without needing to restart the whole process. Then finally, we bring it all home with the final dense prompt, summarize the rent abatement and relocation clauses concisely.
Yeah, pulling it all together.
And the model delivers. The rent abatement clause allows tenants to pause or cut rent during unusable periods due to repairs. The relocation clause lets the landlord move the tenant to a comparable space, covering the relocation expenses. And boom! Just like that, you've extracted exactly what you needed. It's distilled from potentially a huge document, perfectly focused on your specific interest, and you haven't gotten sidetracked by all the other stuff.
That example really highlights the core strength of COD prompting, why it works so well. First, you've got that incremental focus. Each step really does narrow the beam, It zooms in on more specific details of the topic. You're not just asking for a summary, you're actively guiding how that summary develops. It's almost like sculpting the information.
Sculpting, I like that.
Second, the condensed output. That final prompt really achieves the brevity you often need. It summarizes all those specific details you gathered along the way into a really usable, tight format. Because you actively shaped it, the output is much more likely to be actual, actionable intelligence for you.
Right, not just a random collection of facts.
Exactly. And third, maybe the most crucial part is context retention. Throughout that whole back and forth, the model doesn't forget the original goal or the initial document context. This ensures your final summary isn't just concise and detailed, but it's also coherent and completely relevant to what you asked in the first place. This is super important for things like, say, legal documents, where missing one nuance could be a big deal, or maybe in scientific research where getting the findings precisely right is paramount. I think a lot of people find they can now tackle documents they might have just avoided before. It turns what felt like a huge chore into a pretty quick, targeted information pull.
That's incredibly powerful. Yeah. Wow. I'm just thinking back to times I've spent hours manually combing through policy docs for specific clauses like that, realizing now how much time and, frankly, mental energy something like COD could have saved me. It's huge. So the big practical takeaway here seems to be, you can essentially train an LLM right there on the fly with just a few exchanges to understand and summarize precisely what you need from a document. You're tailoring its output to your exact needs. That really does change the game for doing dupe analysis, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Okay, so chain of density helps us really nail down those super specific insights. But what about the situation where you're dealing with, say, a whole batch of similar documents, or you find yourself constantly asking the same type of question, just swapping out maybe a name or a date or a topic? That feels like where our second technique, prompt variables, really comes into its own, making your prompts not just smart, but genuinely adaptable.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Yeah, prompt variables are basically just placeholders inside your prompt text. Think of them like little empty slots. And you can dynamically fill those slots with specific values, names, dates, topics, whatever fits. Connecting this to the bigger picture, it dramatically boosts the reusability and flexibility of your prompts. So instead of writing a whole new prompt just because one detail changes, you just swap out the value in that placeholder. And the source material makes a great comparison here. It's very much like the idea of code reusability in programming. You write a function once, like a template, and then you can call it over and over with different inputs.
Exactly. Okay, let's give a really clear example of that because it sounds simple, but the implications are big. Imagine you have a standard prompt you like to use for summarizing articles, or maybe different sections of a long report. You could write a template prompt like this. Write a summary of the article title, article title. See that bit in the curly braces, article title. That's not fixed text. That's your prompt variable. It's the placeholder, the slot.
The dynamic part.
Right. Now, when you actually want to use this prompt, you just replace article title with the actual title you care about right now.
Yeah.
So maybe you swap it out with the history of artificial intelligence. You send that complete prompt to the LLM, and bam, it generates a summary specifically for that article. Then next time, maybe you need a summary of, I don't know, understanding quantum physics. You just swap that title into the same template. And instantly, you get a completely new summary tailored to that article without having to rewrite the whole instruction part of the prompt. It's all about that template-driven efficiency.
And the impact of this is, well, it's pretty huge in terms of workflow. It means you stop writing prompts from scratch every single time you have a slightly different need. You start building up this library of powerful, templated prompts that just adapt to what you need right now. This saves an enormous amount of time, obviously, but it also brings consistency to how you query information. Beyond just saving time, though, it lets you systematically test things out. You can feed different inputs into the same structured prompt and easily compare the outputs. Plus, you can maintain a consistent voice or style for your summaries, which can be really valuable in, say, professional settings or regulated industries. It just frees up your brain power from the repetitive task of crafting the prompt itself, letting you focus more on actually analyzing the results you get back.
Yeah, for your day-to-day work, it really translates into building your own kind of personal AI assistant framework, doesn't it? You've essentially created your own library of smart, reusable prompts that are perfectly tuned to the tasks you do most often.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay, so let's pull this all together. What's the big picture takeaway for you listening today? We've explored two really incredible techniques, drawing from Maciej Murugesen's work. First, chain of density. That helps you get those deep, concise, super specific summaries. It lets you iteratively guide the LLM to zero in on exactly the information you need, cutting through even really complex documents. And second, prompt variables. They give you that power of flexibility, of reusability. They turn your standard prompts into these adaptable templates you can use in all sorts of situations, saving you time and keeping things consistent.
And it's important to stress, these aren't just, technical tricks for AI geeks. They are genuinely practical, hands-on tools that can fundamentally change how you deal with information every single day. They help you learn faster, but also more thoroughly. They let you explore different angles on a topic without getting totally swamped. And ultimately, they help you combat that feeling of information overload, where you're scrolling endlessly but not really absorbing much. These techniques, because you're actively guiding the process, tend to lead to more of those satisfying aha moments.
Absolutely. And thinking about this is where the really interesting, deeper questions start to bubble up, isn't it? I mean, given how fast these LLM prompting techniques are evolving, what other kinds of hidden efficiencies, what other subtle ways of interacting with AI might we uncover just in our everyday use? Things that could genuinely redefine our whole relationship with information. And maybe even more profoundly, how might really mastering these kinds of methods fundamentally change not just how we learn or do research, but maybe our entire workflows, potentially freeing us up for more, creative and strategic thinking.
It's a fascinating prospect.
It really is. So we genuinely encourage you, try these techniques out for yourself. Experiment with chain of density next time you have a long email thread or a dense report to tackle. See if you can pull out the key points faster. And play around with prompt variables. Create a reusable template for something you do often, whether it's summarizing news or extracting specific data points from standard reports. Just see how they might transform your ability to dive deep into pretty much any topic and pull out exactly the knowledge you need. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and definitely keep asking those deep questions.